Hello, wonderful people. I'm very excited. This is my very first YouTube video. My name is Kobe. I'm here from the Lotus Studio for Music in Berlin. And I want to show you a mix that I did in Luna hybrid with outboard gear. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. So before I play some music, I kind of want to say a little bit about the setup and how we recorded the song, and then I go a bit more into detail. Basically, I started out by listening to Omalay, and then it had these nice Afrobeat beats, played some bass, and then my friend Adri, who's in the studio next door, Adrian Sadegian, he just came in at the moment. I was like, hey, do you want to play guitar on this? He started playing guitar on this, and then over the time I started adding vocals on it. And yeah, that's basically it. Super simple. It's a song I wrote about a breakup, which was very difficult for me. And it's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. Verse, chorus. And yeah, let's jump in the mix, check what I've did there. I might want to show you a verse first, and then I show you a bit on how I routed everything. And then we can go a bit further into detail. Very cool. Let's leave it here for now. So let's talk a bit about the setup. I always do top-down mixing, which means I start with the mix bus first, and then I go into detail. Of course, if there's very big things, I tend to do that without a mix bus, just to hear it a bit more clearly. But as I'm mixing into the mix bus anyways, it doesn't really make sense to listen to things individually without anything on the mix bus, because it'll sound very different after the coloration and everything, right? So my mix bus, on the very end, I have the Fusion. So it's analog outboard gear. It's right over here. It doesn't do all that much, but I just like a bit of analog, I feel like it makes it a bit softer. There's some saturation on there, just a tiny bit. It's really just kissing it. And then on the stereo image, it's also just a tiny bit. It just widens it a bit. And then there's the transformer that's active. Super simple setup, just to give a bit coloration. Then on the mix bus in Luna itself, maybe a couple of words to Luna. I absolutely love Luna. I think it's a great DAW. It's a great software, especially for recording and for mixing. I think it's incredible. So what I love about it is that it really feels like you're working in an analog environment. So it feels like you're working in a console, and it seems fairly intuitive. I always felt everything that I wanted to do just kind of made sense, and I found it right exactly at the place where I was. And with all the tape that's already included on the individual tracks, plus the summing that's included, and then the master tape, you tend to use much more saturation and tape. And I love saturation and tape because it just glues everything and makes things just sound a bit fuller and more like a complete record, and more like it would sound if you were to use tape. So yeah, that being said about Luna, I'm super happy with it. I've done probably 100 mixes with it already, and I will continue to use it as my main DAW. Of course, sometimes I jump between DAWs because for other projects I need Pro Tools or Ableton or Logic or whatever, but I mainly work in Luna. Great. That being said, I have the Fusion set up, and the Fusion, before that I have my mix bus here in the DAW. And the very end, I always put the ATR tape. If I don't put it here on the mix bus, then I put it on the master out. I love this thing. It's incredible. It just really makes a thing sound like a record. There's a couple of presets I know very well, and I know what they do. I often switch in between those, and then I make smaller adjustments going from there. Here I use the classic big 456 master. It's an incredible preset. I love using it. Then a little bit of compression. but really just tiny amounts. I don't like using so much compression on my mix bus. A little bit, sure, but I tend to work more with tape and more with saturation to have the mix bus come together in a good way. Then I have the Hitsville mastering EQ, which is just an incredible EQ. It, like, just even putting on there, I feel makes things sound better. And I often just take out, I put it always in the mid-side EQing, because I feel mid-side EQing makes more sense on the mix bus, for me at least. And then I just figure out, okay, where do I like things? And I tend to open things up towards the higher end and make it thinner and more mono in the lower end. That's kind of my rough guidance. And of course, you know, if there's things I want to enhance or reduce somewhere in the mids, I do that as well. Great. Then I use the Oxford inflator. It does something, it kind of makes things louder, but it does something more than that. It makes tracks a bit more coherent, which I am super in love with. And especially I feel like you don't have so many surprises using it. So sometimes you mix a track and then you give it to a mastering engineer and then they make it super loud with all their tools. And there might be some surprises in it, right? For example, that an element becomes much louder, etc. So that's why I tend to work much more with a mix bus in a top-down approach. And having the Oxford inflator, it enhances a bit some harmonics, I feel. So things that are a bit quieter being raised a bit in a certain way, but in a very musical and comforting way without feeling saturated or anything. And yeah, it sounds great and there's less surprises. So I always use that. And then on the very beginning, I have the black box, which is just a saturator. It's a beast, honestly. Watch out using it, but it's a great tool. I have it like decent amount on 29%, and then the mix is somewhere around 76. So it's a decent amount of saturation. So as you can see, I added a lot of saturation on the entire mix just to make it a bit more coherent. And then there's the Neve summing at the very top, which I also love using. So you can quickly listen to it. So that's with the mix bus. Let's turn it off. Now sit it out, moving on. Even though I thought that you were the one. So in the end, it seems I was wrong. So when I turn it off, of course, there's a loudness difference. It's hard to compensate for now, but it just feels a bit more shaped and a bit more three-dimensional, although the raw mix already sounds really good. Ideally, you don't want to overdo it in your mix bus, but it's good to have like a very strong guidance and direction, I'd say. Great. I'd say from there on out, let's jump into the drums, what I've done there, because I didn't even do so much in drums. Maybe as a side note, I think what's very important here is it's a very unusual mix for me, because I usually have mixes set up in a way where I have very fancy routing, and then I have on every single individual instrument, let's say for all the instruments, I have a certain bus, and then they have their reverb and they have their delays and whatnot, and it gets super complex, and at some point I have just, 20 or 30 cents just set up on the side. And when I get a new mix, I usually do that as well, but I liked the way the song came out of the production, and I didn't want to change it so much. So I also thought, why make it more complicated than it needs to be? I love the way it sounds. So keep it simple and just, let's not try to change things too much. If it sounds good, it sounds good. Move on, right? Okay, drums, super simple. I also just have the black box on here. Very low mix. It just glues it a bit together. I took out some of the sub because the kick was hitting too hard. And again, some tape, just because it makes it sound a bit more like a coherent drum kit, which I like. So then I didn't do all that much, because the samples I chose, I feel they sound incredible and they fit very well together. There's a tiny bit of high end I took out from the rim shot that I didn't like, and I saturated it much more. Every single track on the drums has tape on it. And then on the kick, same thing. I took out some of the low end. And then here, that's maybe a very interesting thing. Let's check out what I did with Soothe, which does absolute wonders, I feel here. So kick starts here. That's with Soothe. And now let's check it out without Soothe. So there's a certain resonance in, somewhere between, let's say, 80 and 150 or so that I didn't like all that much. So I played around until I found a frequency, and you can see how Soothe just, exactly this part here. That's what I don't like. So it does it perfectly. I love it. So I was super happy with that. And then after this, just to keep it a bit more in check, a tiny amount of compression, also just super, super light compression. And yeah, that's basically it for the drum kit. And I think overall, I'm super happy with that. I like the way it sounds. There's things I could think of and like add sparkle, but honestly, I like it. Let's keep it simple. Moving on. Great. Then, of course, always bass and kick, right? Or generally bass and drums. We always want them coherent. These are arguably one of the most important elements because they're the foundation of our music. So let's check out what I did with the bass. On the bass, I just took out some of the mid frequencies. I felt there was a lot of vocals that sit there, and also some of the guitars, just taking out that space. Also, I didn't like this kind of 1 to 2K area from the bass. It was a bit kind of bony or so. I didn't like it, so I took it out. Then, as I really like the low end and the sub part of the bass, I love using the pull tag because it just warms things up on the sub part of things, and it works incredible and basically every single time. Beautiful. It's just beautiful. Woo. Yeah. I love it. It's simple and nothing crazy, nothing fancy, but just a good DI sound. And yeah, then after the boosting the bass, I took some of the mud out. It's usually, somewhere around the 100 to 300 area. I love using Soothe for that. It just works wonders. Not too much, but 1 to 3 dB. Yeah. On the biggest, it's around 3 dB. And which is kind of a compression, yes, but it focuses really only on that muddiness area, right? Where I also, especially, 100 and upwards is already where a lot of the vocals sit and other instruments and a lot of the warmth. It's good that there is bass there to just give it a solid foundation and give it that warmth. But I also like having other instruments there, not just the bass. I think generally it's nice to have a low mids, have them louder and warmer. I think that makes a record sound full, which I like as an aesthetic. Then to shape the overall sound of the bass, I use the LA2A, which is an incredible plugin, I feel, especially for bass. Again, tiny amounts, simple, not much, right? And last but not least, I used Soothe again. You can, why is he using Soothe again? He's crazy. No, I'm just sidechaining the kick. You can see here, there's the sidechain active, the sidechain is active, and it's just hitting when the kick is hitting, it just ducks away the frequency such that the kick punches through a bit more. The bass and the drums together. Sounds great, sounds clean, I like it. Let's move on. I think the next interesting thing could be the guitars. There's a couple of different guitars. Let's maybe start with the first ones that are coming in, and yeah, let's check it out. Yeah, I mean, it sounds incredible. The Galaxy Tape Echo, I mean, we have the analog one as well. We recorded with it on the insert already, so that we had that scape. I liked the way it sounded. I didn't want to change anything about it. One could say, hey, let's EQ that and whatnot, but I really liked the way it sounded. I didn't want to change anything, so I left it like this. And we're going through here. And then we have these other guitars coming in, left, right panned. Just opens up. Absolutely beautiful. Just incredible. I love the way it sounds. It's so touching, it's so beautiful. Again, you could say maybe add sparkler. I loved it. Let's keep it. Moving on. Great. Then next thing up, there's some more guitars coming in here. Those ones, because they're played a bit differently and because we already have the other guitars occupying that space, especially in the low mids. So I'm using the Hitsville EQ, which is just taking out some of the low end, and that the other guitars can sit there much more nicely on the sides, and that these guitars can be a bit more sparkly over that without having to fight so much with the other ones. You can hear they sit a bit in a different range, right? Without, they still sound like the same instrument and in the same room, which I think was important, but they just have a bit another frequency band that they're occupying. Great. Then there's one other guitar that's kind of a build-up guitar for the second chorus. This one, because the way it's played, I put some compression on there. As you can see, I didn't put all that much compression on the other tracks because it goes into compression and saturation on the mix bus already, so I don't need to compress everything, right? It would just take out the dynamics and also the feel and the soul of it. So that's why I left it like this. With this one, it felt a bit different because the plucking was a bit harsh. So just to tame that a little bit, I used an LA3A, which is a fairly clear compressor. It's reasonably fast, not like an 1176, but it's not as slow as an LA2A. And it doesn't color as much, which I really like, not like the LA2A or the 1176, so it's a bit of a cleaner compressor for guitars. I use it often when I use my coloration with other compressors, so that's my go-to often. And then again, the Galaxy, which I really like, and yeah, then there's some delay on it just to give it a bit more space and have it move. We can see here even that it's set on ping pong, right? And then it's set on different left-right settings. So the ping pong is dotted 46 and the triplet 64th, sorry. And that makes it sound a bit wider, which I wanted. So there's a lot of stereo image and widening, which I really like. Cool. Then there's the pad, which doesn't do much. It's just more in the background, a bit quieter. But it just adds a bit of atmosphere that I really enjoy. Okay, let's jump into the vocals. So the way I set up my vocals was that I have 3 different takes. I have my verses, I have my chorus, and then I have my ad-libs, and they all go into my vocal bus, right? Where most of the processing is happening. I used a fairly vintage style approach for this, except for using autotune, just because I'm not the greatest singer on the planet. There's some pitch correction that I did there. And then there is the entire backing bass. So let's walk through it, right? The vocals are highly processed here, and I love the way they sound. Let's maybe turn everything off like this. I said it, I would be moving on. I I love it. I love the way they sound. I think it's the coolest thing on the planet, and I'm super happy with it. So basically, these are the verse vocals. They go in here. There's some tape saturation on there, and then there's summing, just because I love the summing. I have it on almost always. And yeah, from there on out, it goes into tape. I use 250 tape and a half an inch, just because it makes it a bit warmer and just a bit more... I like the way it sounds. It just sounds a bit like closer to your heart, I feel. And then I have autotune on there. It's set to D major because that's the key it is in. I have the Fairchild as a compressor, which I'm super happy with. It acts fairly slow. It's not a very fast song, so I didn't feel like I need a fast compressor. LA2A, another very slow compressor. So also here, as none of what I'm singing is very fast, it doesn't need that, right? I kind of like that it also leaves the dynamics, right? It kind of comes out when it's loud and then disappears a bit again. So then the effect, the biggest effect that comes here is probably happening because of the alto boy, which is set to pitch -12 and form and -3. This is what makes my vocal sound so crazy. Now said it, I would be moving on. Right? Like it works without it as well, but with it it's just kind of... Now said it, I would be moving on. I don't know, there's something about it, I like it, so let's do it, why not? Then to add a bit of width to it, I used the Echo Boy. So there's many different ways of adding width to vocals. Many people use wideners, etc. I like doing it with delay a lot. I did show the similar thing, what I did earlier with the guitars, which is using a ping pong set very, very quick and have them slightly differently. And then just put in the mix knob to taste, but it just widens the vocals a bit, right? I love it. Beautiful. To add a bit of more depth to the vocals, and it was a difficult time for me to add, like the stress that it's hard, with, breaking up with someone. I added a tremolator because it, made my world feel a bit shaky. So that's what I did here. And then the Filter Freak just kind of moves around a bit and gives it some movement. It's just a little bit, but you can feel it. Even though I thought that it just adds a little bit to it that I really enjoy. Then last but not least, that's very untypical for me because I always use the UAD plugins and I always use the Hitsville chambers, and I love the sound of the chamber EQ, the chamber reverb. But here I used mainly the Sound Toys, and the plate it's awesome. I love the sound of it. It's just so spatial and so beautiful. I said it, I would be moving on. Crazy like this as well with it. I said it, I would be moving on. It's an incredible plate. God damn, I love it. So cool. Crazy. So, that's basically it. And then we can maybe jump into the chorus. In the chorus, there's quite a lot happening in terms of like energy shift. And I wanted to show the pain that I went through. So I completely destroyed the vocals, basically using the radiator and the decapitator and some more compression. I just really destroyed it, and to intensify the sound of it. Let's check it out. I never thought that I could leave you. Now that I did, never felt so blue. that's basically it. Here you get the full overview of what I did with this mix. It's yeah, I don't know at the moment what to do with it. I'm probably gonna let it rest for a couple of weeks, maybe come back. Maybe I will release it, maybe not. I don't know. It was just something that we did in an evening time, and then I spent another couple of hours mixing it. And I like the way it sounds, so I hope this is useful to you. Click like, click like and subscribe. Be super grateful for that to happen. I hope you have a wonderful day. That's it for me. Peace.